In December 1963, Tokyo was shaken by the news. Japan's national hero, wrestler Rikidozan, was fatally wounded in a nightclub. He was killed by a young Yakuza, Katsuji Murata, after a routine quarrel. This murder became a national tragedy. For the first time, society saw how deeply the Mafia had infiltrated everyday life. The authorities began to openly fight the Yakuza. But Murata the killer served only 8 years and himself became a respected member of the clan, apologizing to Rikidozan's family every year. But what is truly astonishing is that Rikidozan was not Japanese. He was Korean, hiding his origins. And yet, he became a national symbol of Japan. This paradox only heightened the tension between the Mafia and society. But how did it even happen that in modern Japan the Mafia is so open and so confident that its members carry official business cards and rent offices with signs? The answer to this is far more shocking than it might seem at first glance. Seeing someone in Japan with a prosthetic for one or more fingers is not uncommon. But to find out that the reason for this is not an accident or illness, but a strict internal rule of the Mafia, is much less expected. The ritual is called yubitsume, which literally translates as finger cutting. This is a punishment within the Yakuza for failing a task, breaking the hierarchy, or showing disrespect to a superior. And it's not just a punishment, it's an act of atonement. The offender cuts off a segment of their own little finger and presents it to their boss. The more violations, the fewer fingers remain. This ritual originated back in the Edo period. It was believed that a person who had lost 1 or 2 fingers could no longer reliably hold a sword and thus became dependent on the clan. This is a system of psychological and physical subjugation, reinforced by pain and humiliation. Moreover, anyone who saw such a mark would immediately understand that they were facing a member of the Mafia. A real one, not a movie version. When Japan intensified its fight against the Yakuza in the 2000s, one of the side effects was a surge in demand for prosthetic finger phalanges. People began to hide their past mistakes en masse in order to avoid increased surveillance. Today, there is even a black market for silicone tips that imitate natural finger phalanges. This is an industry literally built on pain. What's especially important is that yubitsume cannot be faked. You can't pretend to do it. It's a real physical price paid for a violation. And in it, the entire philosophy of the Yakuza is reflected. Absolute loyalty, fear, and a hierarchy reinforced by blood. But if anyone thinks that this kind of Mafia hides out in basements, they're mistaken. In any other country, the Mafia is a shadow. Secret meetings, coded names, phones without SIM cards. But not in Japan. In Japan, in an ordinary residential neighborhood of Tokyo or Osaka, you might see a 2-story building with a neat sign at the entrance. The headquarters of Yamaguchi Gumi or Kyoto Kurakai. This is not a joke, it's reality. Moreover, these offices used to have signs and even contact phone numbers. Local residents knew that if there was trouble in the neighborhood, all they had to do was knock there. They would sort things out faster than the police. So why is this even possible? The answer lies in the unique legal and social position. The Yakuza. Until the 2000s, it existed in a legal gray area. On one hand, it was a criminal organization. On the other, it was a social phenomenon that was officially allowed to operate as long as it didn't break the law. A sort of legalized mafia. Moreover, Yakuza offices often played the role of mediators between businesses, citizens, and even the police. In some cases, victims of robberies would turn not to the police station, but to the local clan. Why? Because the Yakuza acted quickly and without red tape. Naturally, you had to pay for the service, either directly or through a contract. But the government couldn't turn a blind eye to this forever. After the reforms that began in the 1990s, the authorities started to crack down. Signs started to be taken down. Addresses were hidden. But even today, in the 21st century, you can still find such offices in some areas. They just look more modest now. In Japan, tattoos are not a fashion trend, but almost a taboo. Especially when it comes to full body coverage. From shoulders to ankles, including the back, chest, and thighs, such tattoos are called irezumi, and most often they belong to members of the Yakuza. Every centimeter of the body is covered in symbols: dragons, carp, waves, chrysanthemums, demons. Each image has its own meaning, its own purpose. The dragon stands for strength and power. The carp swims against the current. Courage and perseverance. Flowers symbolize the fragility and transience of life. This is not just art, it's a code written on the body. But contrary to expectations, displaying these tattoos is forbidden even among their own. It's part of a culture of secrecy. Usually they are completely hidden under clothing, and you can only see them, perhaps, in a bathhouse. And not in everyone, at that. People with irezumi are often simply not allowed into public baths and gyms. Interestingly, in some clans, the tattoo is a mandatory part of initiation. It's painful, time-consuming, and expensive. Sometimes, applying the design takes several years. Moreover, the tattoo is done by hand, without a machine, using a special needle. It's a true test of endurance. Unlike in Western culture, where tattoos are a fashion statement, in the Yakuza, they are a sign of belonging, almost like a military dog tag. But over time, fakes started to appear as well. Young people would get similar designs without being members of the clan. This angered real Yakuza, because for them it's not just about aesthetics, it's an oath. But if tattoos are a symbol of belonging, what about money? After all, the Mafia has income too. A lot of income. Even to the point of officially paying taxes. What? The Mafia pays taxes? Now let me tell you one of the strangest facts about the Yakuza. They really do pay taxes. Yes, you heard that right. Officially. On paper? With stamps and seals? Moreover, the government recognizes this. How is that even possible? Before the reforms of the 1990s and 2000s, the Yakuza had the right to conduct non-criminal activities. That is, if their business did not directly break the law, it was considered legal. A lot was registered under front men, but taxes were still paid on the income. It was a fine line between legality and crime. Some clans voluntarily made contact with the tax authorities. Why? First, it gave them status. Second, it spared them from excessive police attention. And of course, it also served as a kind of insurance in court proceedings. Like, we pay taxes, so we're not hiding. There were even cases when the tax authorities would come to the Yakuza office and discuss expense deductions. Seriously, expenses for transportation, security maintenance, and office rent were all taken into account. Legal casuistry in action. However, starting in the 2000s, a crackdown began. Laws were introduced blocking bank accounts, banning the purchase of real estate, and prohibiting the ownership of SIM cards. To become a mafioso means to become an outcast. So why do they continue to exist? And this is where the story begins, with roots that go back not just to the post-war years, but to the era of the samurai, when honor was worth more than life and the sword had no sheath. That is where the real history of the Yakuza began. After peace was established in Japan in the 17th century, many samurai found themselves without masters. These ronin began to look for new ways to survive. Some went into security, others into crime. At the same time, groups like the Bakuto, gamblers, and the tekiya street merchants emerged. They needed fighters, and former samurai turned out to be the perfect candidates. Thus began the transformation from warrior to criminal agent. The term Yakuza comes from the losing card combination 893. Initially derogatory, it became a symbol of a caste, outcasts with their own laws and code of honor. Even then, the structure, hierarchy, and concept of loyalty to the clan began to take shape. These elements have survived for centuries and to this day form the foundation of all Yakuza groups. Summer of 45. Japan surrenders. The country is in ruins, cities are bombed out, industry is paralyzed, and millions of people are left without work, food, or shelter. The authorities can't cope, and into this vacuum steps the old power of the Yakuza. After the war, a huge number of Korean and Chinese workers remained in Japan, former prisoners whom the Japanese army had brought into the country for hard labor. These groups quickly began to self-organize into criminal clans, which led to a rise in street violence, robberies, and banditry. The police were demoralized, there was a shortage of weapons, and law and order was hanging by a thread. So paradoxically, the authorities turned to the Yakuza for help. These are the facts. The clans were entrusted with guarding police stations, patrolling the streets, and even clearing out certain areas. From Korean gangs. In one well-known case, the Yakuza guarded a police station in Tokyo to prevent it from being looted by gangs. Amidst the chaos, the Mafia experienced a powerful surge, and with it came the first real money. Humanitarian aid from the US began to be traded in the ports. Who controlled it? That's right, the Yakuza clans. American military personnel were stationed in Japan, and they needed services, entertainment, food, women, alcohol. All of this was also controlled by the clans. This is how a new phenomenon emerged. The Mafia not only survived the crisis, it became an economic and social regulator. Politics? Not yet. For now, it's a shadow business that's pulling the country out of the post-war nightmare. It was at this moment that the clan which would become the most important in Yakuza history emerged onto the scene. A clan known even to those who have never been interested in the Mafia. Yamaguchi-gumi. This story began in the 1930s in the port city of Kobe. A group of street fighters who protected dock workers and ran gambling houses eventually united under the banner of the Yamaguchi-gumi. But the clan gained real power after the war, when Kazuo Taoka, a man known by the nickname The Bear, came to power. Taoka was not just a fighter, he was a strategist, a businessman, and a diplomat. Under him, the Yamaguchi-gumi absorbed one clan after another, expanding its influence, first across western Japan, then to Osaka, and eventually to Tokyo. One of the most notorious moments was the crushing defeat of the rival Minamikai group. 5 surviving leaders brought the tips of their own fingers and acknowledged Taoka's authority. But it wasn't just about brutality. Tauka organized the clan to function like a real corporation. There were logistics, finance, and security departments, internal regulations, a reporting system, and opportunities for career advancement. Everything was just like in a large company, with only one difference. Those who made mistakes were fired along with a finger, or even their life. He also introduced a system of external reputation, aid for earthquake victims, neighborhood order control, and charity events. All of this created the image of Robin Hoods, even though behind the scenes there was racketeering, prostitution, drug trafficking, and gambling. Under Tauka, Yamaguchi-gumi became the first clan to operate throughout all of Japan, and later even beyond its borders. But the most interesting part was yet to come. It was under his leadership that the Mafia first entered the white-collar offices of Japan's largest corporations, through a scheme that became known as corporate racketeering. It's hard to believe, but the largest companies in Japan knew about this and kept silent. In the 1980s, Japan was experiencing an economic boom. Corporations were growing and billions of yen were circulating every day. But where there is big money, there are also temptations. In large companies, corruption schemes, kickbacks, and fake contracts became more frequent. And that's when the Yakuza stepped in, not with bats and knives, but with folders and compromising material. This system was called Sokaya, a form of corporate racketeering built with surgical precision. How did it work? Young people with good educations gathered dossiers on executives and companies. They found weak spots, hidden connections, undeclared income, and rigged tenders. Then, representatives of an anti-corruption organization would come to the director and show the folder. Either you place an ad in our magazine for $100,000, or we hand this over to the press. No threats, no violence, just paperwork. And it worked. Companies paid up. The scale was so enormous that at some point, even the Yakuza clans themselves started paying attention to these anti-corruption organizations. Independent racketeers were either absorbed or eliminated. Then they went even further. The Mafia began joining boards of directors, lobbying for mergers and deals, and gaining access to corporate information. Sometimes they even used shareholders to sabotage annual meetings, causing scandals and demanding re-elections. The government began passing laws. One of them required companies to hold their annual meetings on the same day to make it harder for the Mafia to interfere. But the Mafia had already entrenched itself. The largest airline, automobile brands, steel giants, all of them had ties to the Yakuza. Unofficial, but very real. And if today someone says that there is no more Mafia in business, they are either naive or disingenuous. But how is the Yakuza actually organized from the inside? What goes on behind the doors of their headquarters? Visually, a Yakuza office looks like an ordinary building. No golden thrones or gunmen at the entrance. Most often, it's a two-story structure with white walls and wooden trim in the traditional Japanese style. At the entrance, there's a sign with the clan's name. Previously, it even included business hours. These days, it's more modest, but the essence remains the same. Inside, there's an amazing mix of tradition and business structure. There's a reception room, the boss's office, a meeting hall, and an altar with offerings, a symbol of the clan's spiritual side. And of course, there are displays with photographs, the boss, his deputies, and veterans. The hierarchy is strict. At the top is the Kumiteo, the clan leader. Below are the advisors, commanders, and senior brothers. At the bottom are the junior brothers and newcomers. Everyone has their own role and level of access. Newcomers don't even know the names of the leadership, only their nicknames or titles. There's an accounting department, a security service, and a legal department. Yes, you heard right, a legal department. Large clans have their own lawyers who advise on real estate, contracts, and even divorce cases. It's just like a corporation, only with a Yakuza twist. And it's in these offices that decisions are made which affect millions of dollars and thousands of people. Decisions that can mean the start of a war between clans or a merger, just like with big companies. But the scariest part is that some of these decisions concern elections. Politicians, parliament, prime ministers, all of this is not as far removed from the shadow of the Yakuza as one might like to think. And this is the next layer of their power. The Yakuza have long since learned how to influence Japanese politics through money, fear, and connections. In the 1950s, the Mafia financed politicians, guarded rallies, and even suppressed strikes at the request of the authorities. Yoshio Kodama is especially well known, a liaison between the Mafia, right-wing radicals, and the U.S. intelligence services. His organizations supported the ruling party and helped maintain order in the country by suppressing the communist movement. In exchange, the Yakuza gained access to tenders, protection, and the ability to operate with greater freedom. When the President of the United States was scheduled to visit Japan, the government asked the clans to provide security. This cooperation continued for decades, and although the laws became stricter, the Mafia simply learned to operate through front organizations and foundations. Behind the facade of democracy, it was often they who stood. Since the beginning of the 20th century, Japan has been an arena, a battleground of ideologies. Communism, socialism, liberalism, each sought to claim its place. But it was ultra-nationalism that stood out most vividly, and the Yakuza quickly saw it as a tool. Yoshio Kodama, already known to us as the architect of alliances between the Mafia and politics, creates an organization called the Patriotic Council. This is not just about slogans and flags, it's a real system of influence over rallies, the media, and cultural events. And of course, over street power. In Japan, it's common to see buses driving around cities, blaring speeches and patriotic slogans. Return the Northern Territories, Japan for the Japanese. Behind these convoys stand the ultra-right, funded by the Yakuza. The paradox is that the Yakuza is an organization in which up to 10% of its members have Korean roots. And yet they support organizations shouting about a pure nation. Why? The answer is manipulation. Patriotism. In this case, it's not the goal, but a means to an end. The louder the protest, the higher the chance of negotiating with the authorities. The more people on the street, the more leverage there is. The Mafia uses patriotic rhetoric as a business resource. After all, at the core of any protest, there is always money, and who knows how to handle money better? The Yakuza. These radicals eliminated undesirables, discredited the opposition, and created the image of an external enemy. All of this helped to strengthen the desired political regimes. And in return, the Mafia received immunity, budgets, contracts, and silence in the media. Patriotism is a convenient mask. And behind it were hidden billions of yen, connections with corporations and international agreements. Yes, that's right, international ones. Because the Yakuza have long since become more than just a Japanese story. Yakuza, Terashiose, Ishoma, Yatuchi, Kokudze, this has long ceased to be just a Japanese story. Even after World War II, the clans began to expand beyond the country's borders. The first places were Hawaii and California, then Southeast Asia and Australia followed. Connections with Chinese triads, Korean gangs, and even Latin American drug cartels made it possible to build extensive criminal networks. Smuggling, money laundering, human trafficking, all of this brought in millions. The seafood industry took on a special role. Tuna, caviar, shark fins. Through illegal channels, they ended up in restaurants and warehouses all over the world. Today, the Yakuza invests in hotels, casinos, IT, and even foreign stock markets. Their traces can be found in London, Singapore, Los Angeles. The Mafia has adapted and now operates like a transnational corporation. In traditional Japanese culture, a woman is the keeper of the hearth. In the Yakuza, it's not quite like that. Although the clan structure remains male-dominated, there have been exceptions in history that have turned the idea of a woman's role in the Mafia upside down. One of the most prominent names is Fumika Taoka. After the death of her husband, the legendary Kazuo Taoka, it was she who led the Yamaguchi Gumi clan for several years. Not just as a temporary caretaker of power, but in fact as a strategist and negotiator capable of preventing the clan from splitting. Fumika negotiated with other clans, resolved disputes, directed revenues, consulted with advisors, and made key decisions. Surprisingly, within the Yakuza itself, her authority was recognized not as a woman, but as a leader. Women in the clans also played other important roles. Properties, bank accounts, and businesses were often registered in their names to avoid sanctions. Some wives of Mafia members managed the accounting, oversaw logistics, and even acted as intermediaries during negotiations. But there was also a dark side. Women, especially young ones, often became bargaining chips in relationships, blackmail, and control over brothels. However, some individuals still managed to break through to the top. Today, women Yakuza are less often seen in open roles, but their influence in the shadows has not disappeared. And most interestingly, they have their own tattoos, their own history, and their own rituals, just like the men. What happens when a child is born into a Yakuza family? Is he doomed to a life of crime? Or is there a chance to break free? Being born into a Yakuza family means growing up in the shadow of power, risk, and fear. These children don't read about the Mafia in comic books. They see it at the breakfast table. Weapons, money, bodyguards, evening meetings. All of this was normal for them. However, not every child in the clan wants to follow in their father's footsteps. Moreover, many of them are ashamed of it. Society knows what Yakuza families look like, and even if you change your last name, the trace remains in the system. This means that a child can be denied admission to a university, a job, or even marriage. In recent decades, an entire generation of Mafia children has grown up in Japan who have publicly renounced their past. They changed their names, moved abroad, and started from scratch. But there are also those who, on the contrary, joined the clans as adults out of a desire to take revenge on the society that rejected them. Interestingly, many clans try not to involve their children in Mafia affairs. There is even a rule that until a child comes of age, they cannot be told about the criminal side of the family. He is not supposed to see blood, hear negotiations, or understand the logic of the streets, at least officially. But secrets rarely stay secret, especially when a father comes home missing 2 fingers, or when the whole family has to leave urgently after a conflict with another clan. And yet it was the children of the Mafia who became the driving force behind the internal transformation of the Yakuza. Some of them brought in new ideas, technologies, and digital security. And some became traitors, those who broke the code of silence and gave the authorities their first real chance, the first serious opportunity. But the Mafia's business did not stop. On the contrary, it moved into a new sphere where billions change hands faster than the spin of a slot machine reel. When it comes to Yakuza, earnings, drugs, racketeering, and prostitution immediately come to mind. But in reality, the main source of income for the Mafia in Japan is much quieter and less noticeable. It's the pachinko slot machines. Pachinko is a hybrid between a slot machine and pinball. There are tens of thousands of such parlors in Japan. Officially, it's considered entertainment. But in reality, yes, it's the largest gray area of the economy where billions of dollars circulate every year. A significant part of this market has historically been controlled by Yakuza clans. How does it work? Winnings from pachinko can't be exchanged for cash directly in the parlor. Instead, the player receives prizes, most often gold or tokens, which can immediately be sold in a neighboring building registered to a different company. Formally, it's not considered gambling, but in reality, it's a military-grade money laundering machine that's been operating for decades. At first, the Yakuza controlled the parlors themselves. Then they took over equipment supply, then maintenance, and even the transportation of the prizes won. Through this market, the clans laundered illegal money, tested their influence on city authorities, and financed other areas of activity. At its peak, the pachinko industry had an annual turnover of $30 billion. That's more than the GDP of some countries. And although the market has been declining in recent years, the Mafia's influence remains, especially in regions where there are simply no alternatives to this kind of industry. Many people know that the largest manufacturers of machines and equipment suppliers often have direct or indirect ties to former clan members. People move into legal businesses, but the connections remain, and the money keeps flowing. But the paradox of the Yakuza is that despite their dark reputation, they often become heroes, especially during disasters. How is that possible? January 16th. In 1995, at 5:46 in the morning, a massive earthquake struck the city of Kobe. More than 6,000 dead, tens of thousands of buildings destroyed, chaos, panic. The government hesitated. Rescue services were overwhelmed and people needed help. Right then and there, that's when trucks with Yakuza logos appeared on the streets. They handed out water, food, blankets, masks, and medicine. No delays, no bureaucracy. Local residents couldn't believe it. The Mafia was the first to come to their aid, while government agencies were still gathering for a meeting. This was not an isolated incident. During the Tohoku earthquake in 2011, and even during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Yakuza stepped in again. Masks, antiseptics, money, all of this the clans provided to hospitals, schools, even police stations. Why? There are several theories. The first is PR. It's an opportunity to improve their reputation, especially in the eyes of local residents. The second, a practical reason. It's easier to maintain control over neighborhoods if people are grateful to you. The third, a philosophical one. Many clans still have codes in place in which helping those in need is part of their obligations. But regardless of the reasons, the fact remains. When the government couldn't cope, the Mafia took action. And for many Japanese people, this created cognitive dissonance. Who here is the criminal and who is the savior? Of course, help comes at a price, sometimes literally, sometimes with your reputation. Still, in recent years, it's become increasingly difficult for the Mafia. Laws are tightening, the police are cracking down. They even have to hide their fingers. When the Japanese government got serious about fighting the Yakuza, it bet on social isolation. Direct wars were not organized. Instead, laws were introduced that made life for a mafioso impossible in everyday life. Open a bank account? Forbidden. Buy a SIM card? It is forbidden. Rent an apartment? Only through a frontman. The Mafia has come under complete digital and legal blockade. But this especially affected external features. Yubitsume, the ritual of cutting off finger phalanges, became a problem. After all, any Yakuza could be recognized on the street by it, and that means trouble, surveillance, arrest. A solution was found quickly. Silicone prosthetics appeared on the market. Ultra-thin, realistic, and easy to put on the stump of a finger. They began to be ordered en masse. There are even salons specializing in restoring pinky fingers. The price started at several $1,000s, but demand was through the roof. Others went even further. Some former Yakuza undergo surgeries to restore the phalanx using bone transplants, all for the sake of blending into society. But fingers weren't the only target. Tattoos are now carefully removed with lasers. Bank accounts are registered in the name of a wife or a friend. Offices are disguised as air conditioner repair companies. All of this is a struggle for survival in a world where the system for hunting down the Mafia has truly gone digital. Even with such isolation, the Yakuza continues to exist, and yet it all starts with something small, with a sake ceremony, with a single signed contract, with a single ritual. From the moment a person decides to become part of the clan, joining the Yakuza is not just about accepting an invitation. It's about undergoing a ceremony that changes your fate. Initiation is a process where there is no place for random people. The core of the ritual is the sake ceremony. The candidate and his future mentor, the Aniki-san, sit facing each other. Between them lies a white sheet of paper, symbolizing the purity of their relationship. Sake is poured for each of them into a porcelain cup. First, the candidate drinks from the mentor's cup, then vice versa. In this way, they symbolically form a blood bond. After this, the newcomer receives a name, a title, and a status. From this moment on, he becomes part of the clan, with all the resulting obligations to obey the hierarchy, follow orders, maintain silence, and pay dues. Next come practical tests. The newcomer participates in activities to prove his loyalty. Sometimes it's just courier work, sometimes debt collection, and sometimes even direct violence. It all depends on the clan and its profile. Importantly, in large clans, when joining, an informal contract is signed. It states that the person is aware of the risks, accepts the code, and waives any claims in case of arrest or death. Yes, it's all unofficial, but within the clan, it's ironclad. Some clans also require candidates to undergo a test of endurance. This could be spending 3 days alone in a room without food or completing a dangerous task. If you fail, you don't get in. If you think joining the organization is hard, leaving is almost impossible. Renunciation is only possible through an official ceremony and often involves losing a finger, property, and contact with your family. So why, despite all this, does the Mafia continue to exist? Why, even today, in the era of digital surveillance, does the Yakuza not disappear? Despite pressure, arrests, and total digital control, the Yakuza does not disappear. The reason is simple. It's not just about crime. It's an entire system. The Yakuza knows how to make itself needed. It helps where the government falls short, settles disputes, protects small businesses, and intervenes in crisis situations. For many, it is a parallel authority to turn to when official channels don't work. Moreover, the Mafia is embedded in the economy, in construction companies, logistics, and the gambling business. Even after bans, they find workarounds. Through shell companies, foreign agents, and technological tricks. Ultimately, it's a matter of identity. The Yakuza lives in the minds of the Japanese as part of their history, dark but familiar. And as long as there is demand for strength, protection, and money, there will always be someone ready to offer all of that for a certain price.